Iván Fischer, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me on behalf of Migros Classics. It's great to have you on. You will soon conduct Mahler's Fifth Symphony in Switzerland. What do you remember about your first encounter with this work?
Oh, this was a very long time ago when I was a student in Vienna, and I was a student of Hans Swarovski, a very famous teacher. And the excitement in the city at that time was all because of the visit of Leonard Bernstein, who came to Vienna from the United States. And he made concerts and also film recordings of all Mahler's symphonies, or maybe not all of them, but I absolutely remember the fifths when he recorded it. And we were the conducting students, and we went to listen to the rehearsals, what he did with the Vienna Philharmonic. And we had to hide a little bit because the orchestra wasn't happy when there were many young conductors there at the rehearsals, but it didn't matter. So we had a wonderful time, and these rehearsals, I still remember them very clearly, because the orchestra at that time didn't know this work, or didn't know it well at all. So there were many difficulties, especially in the third movement, and sometimes Bernstein was a bit also annoyed, but he was a very friendly person, so it was never really harsh.
So it was this beginning of the time when Leonard Bernstein brought Mahler back to the public, basically.
Yes, this cycle had an incredible success. I cannot describe it to you. I remember that the rehearsals were a little difficult, tense, and the concerts were like a celebration. And I think this was the concert cycle which started this cult about Mahler symphonies in Europe. Before that time, of course, I was very young, but I remember my father also told me, yes, Mahler was a great conductor and he also composed. But Mahler as a composer was really idolized after this cycle of Leonard Bernstein.
Perhaps a few questions about the work itself. In this symphony, there is everything, right? And among other things, there are many big climaxes, big build-ups also in each of the movement almost. And as interpreters, though, one is often told not to overdo things, right? And not to play loud all the time. How do you manage that, this abundance of intensity without overwhelming the listener?
Mahler is in fact, you are right, that has a high level of intensity, high level of emotions, and sometimes expression. So it's true, it has extremes. Now, can one overdo it or not overdo it? I don't know. Mahler actually was fascinated by the extremes. There were stories that he wanted a big bass drum in Essen, Germany, to sound louder and louder, and then he himself hit the drum until the drum broke. So he wanted extremes. And also, I heard another story that he went to see the Niagara Falls when he was in America, and he went down to this tunnel where you see the water falling in front of your face. And then he came out and he said, finally forte, which means that it was finally loud enough, something. So he liked this, he needed it. Now, the instruments were a little different at that time. They were much softer. They were not so extreme. They were more human, with strings, with the gut strings, and smaller woodwind and brass instruments. I think the volume of an orchestra of Mahler's time was about half the volume of our modern orchestras. So you are also right that if we give now the maximum sound, it's probably too much in certain passages. But the expression, the emotional expression, is not something which you should moderate. I don't think it's possible. Of course, you can make all kinds of mistakes, and I hear Mahler performed very often just wrong, too fast or too slow or too much slowing down here and there, or people make mistakes all the time. But emotionally, it should be extreme.
In the middle movement, in the scherzo, the horn takes a striking role, right? It is a soloistic part. Who is this horn character, and what does it represent to you in the symphony?
He calls it an obbligato horn. The horn is like a soloist, but not completely. It's more like an important instrument, always in dialogue with the first violins or with other instruments. It has a prominent role. Horn is, of course, an instrument which is somehow German and Austrian in its very essence. And it fits this connection to the Austrian folklore what Mahler has, especially the way he writes for horn. It can sound extremely Viennese, or not even Viennese, but more like music from Tyrol or that part of Austria, where there's a little Schrammel music in Mahler's writing. And this horn solo, why it's a leader of the orchestra. He does it very often. For example, in the Fourth Symphony, for the scherzo, he writes a violin which is higher tuned than the other violins. What is that? One can make all kinds of allegories and ideas which are not purely musical ideas. What if it represents something? And I'm not against it, but I don't think it's on a level of something which we can put into words. Mahler always works on an intuitively musical level, and we can hear certain elements which we associate with parts of life, like what I said about the Austrian folklore and the horn, but ultimately it's abstract music.
Yeah, it is my feeling that Mahler's music invites often more interpretation than music by other composers. For example, you've also quoted Leonard Bernstein saying that Mahler was a prophet for the Holocaust in the Trauermarsch. Despite it being a symphony without a program, without a title. So why do we feel so free with making big interpretations with Mahler?
Or we associate or we recognize certain parts of life in Mahler's music. I think you are right. It's more connected to life than other composers. And I think the reason is that Mahler picks up musical ideas from what he hears. There are clear musical sources in Mahler's music. For example, if you have cowbells, or you have a military band, or you have a Yiddish folk song, or a military march. There are all kinds of recognizable elements. So he is a composer who puts a collage together of things he heard here and there, and this is his art. And because we also recognize the Yiddish folk song, or we recognize the military march, it connects us to our experiences too. So it's true that Mahler's music is connected to our life too. And I always have a feeling that his music is a little bit like a psychoanalysis. If somebody talks about the experiences, the inner feelings, not necessarily in a logical order, but as it comes. And this is exactly Mahler's music. I can kind of see him lying there in the middle of a psychoanalytic session.
And just putting associations, and I think you've also described it as eclectic music, no? Mahler's symphony.
Yes, it is, because you can call it eclectic, that he uses elements. These elements are quotations, sometimes musical elements. They remind me on Schubert, especially in the first symphony, for example, or Bach occasionally, Haydn in the fourth symphony. So he uses what he learned from other composers, and also from the street, what he hears in the street. He picks up the dirt from the street and makes it art. But he picks up many things, and this makes him an eclectic composer in a good sense.
As far as I understand it, as interpreters or as conductors, you have to balance some parameters in an interpretation to give the audience the best possible experience, right? Volume, timing, and those things to a certain extent stay organic, or then maybe there's a tipping point where it doesn't feel so organic anymore. When is maybe the moment when you sense that things start to feel overthought or maybe even manipulated?
In Mahler's case, everything serves the expression. So it's the human expression in music. It's not constructed in a cold mathematical way, but it pours out of his heart. So and this type of music, which is so clearly emotional, I don't think one can make any interpretation. You know, interpretation is anyway a dangerous word, which I have big question marks if it exists at all. But in case of Mahler, it's impossible to interpret, because you either feel it, what he feels, or you don't, and then you are wrong. So you have to just let the music come to you, and it will immediately awaken the same expression what he composed, and you just do it. So it doesn't work in this way where you would think a little more, a little less, a little more, no, just right. So you don't add a little salt and a little pepper and then a little less water and a little more eggs in it. It's not that type of cooking. It's more something which just happens intuitively, and because the music is so intuitive, you feel it, and then you either resonate to Mahler's music or not. Anybody who tries to put in something extra is completely wrong. It can be terrible. So I think you can perform it just right or wrong.
Sounds very easy.
I find it actually easy. because it's not difficult to perform this music because it's so obvious. He also writes many things into the parts because he doesn't want to be misunderstood. He wants to make it clear what he wants, how he feels it, and it's so obvious. Even those markings in the parts are sometimes not necessary because one would understand it anyway.
These question marks about interpretations, why are you not such a friend of this term and this process?
Because I think it's first of all overstated. It makes the performer too important, and it is something which serves more our music ritual than the composition. I give you an example. Like in the middle of the 19th century, it was all about opera prima donnas. The great soprano was the center of attention, and the composer's role was mainly to write good showpieces for this great soprano who was the star of the evening. So the main part is the performer, and we don't have that type of star fascination at the moment. In certain areas of pop music we do. The singer is more important than the composer, but in our culture, the composer is important. So what we want to hear is the message of the music, of the composed music. Now, in this culture, I think the performer is somebody who makes it work, who puts it in sound, because it's only on a piece of paper, and now you have to make it sound. I usually use this analogy of Moses and Aaron, that Moses was the prophet and he received all the images, the ideas, the prophecies from some divine source, and the brother Aaron could speak well to the people, so he was the interpreter. But why should he interpret the prophecy? He should just deliver it, say it truthfully, what his brother was saying. So I think we exaggerate now the role of Aaron, and I am more interested in the original prophecy, and the brother should only deliver it as well as he can, but not interpret it.
Maybe again on that note, there are some really great conducting masterclasses of you with Concertgebouw Orchestra online, and what keeps striking me in those masterclasses is the beautiful and many images you are able to give for any given part. Where do you come up with these images?
I don't remember now what I said, but I have no idea. I don't know. I try to use for example, when you say images in rehearsals with the orchestra, if it helps them to express something in a certain way. Actually, music is only an F sharp and a D natural and a G, so it's not other things, it's notes. And but when the composer writes, the composer has a certain expression, a feeling, and to feel that as a performer, it helps sometimes to compare it to things we know from normal life, and I try to use maybe that type of help, but it's only necessary if somebody doesn't feel things immediately.
I see. Okay. So in the Budapest Festival Orchestra, in the trailer for the next season, we can hear you and see you speaking about truth, about fiction, and the orchestra's role in the community. What kind of role do you believe these orchestras or even classical music can realistically play into this social and cultural landscape?
I know what you refer to because I made this comment a few times recently that I think an orchestra in a community has a very important role now that the truth is so more difficult to grasp. It's elusive. We don't know what is true and what is fake, and it maybe my face now here is an artificial face, but it's not. But who knows? And this insecurity in the world, I think, puts us in a position of responsibility, because I think an orchestra playing a work of a composer is true. It is really that work, and when we play, it's a true situation. It's not fake. It's not cheating. It's not lying, and therefore there develops a contact between an orchestra and its audience, that the audience trusts the orchestra. Now, this trust seems to be missing now in the world more and more. Can you trust politicians? Can you trust, I don't know, actors, celebrities, priests? Who can you trust? It's very difficult. And if you have a group of people where you regularly go to and you trust them, then that is an incredibly important contact, and we could extend it because we have this responsibility. That's why I sometimes said that I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, orchestras would deliver the daily news to people, because it's true. Because we wouldn't cheat. Or at least the audience trusts the orchestra that we wouldn't cheat.
So that sounds like a very important parameter, this trust in the orchestra. Is that what you would say is important that orchestras build on in the next years?
Yes, I just have a feeling that there is this trust element. You know, it's very difficult to trust people. For example, a doctor. You are very ill, you go to the doctor says something. You have to trust the doctor, otherwise it's very, very it's terribly insecure situation that you don't know, is he or she going to help me or not help me? So people need this trust, the contact to somebody or some people where they can go and say, yes, now I know this is true. All I say is that an orchestra can help. And you are asking, how can an orchestra help? This is very difficult to say. I had this vision of this image of the future, that everything will be fake. You know, when everything is fake already, then, for example, there is advertisement. An advertisement tells you that this is the best possible pair of shoes you can buy, or this is the healthiest milk you should drink. Can you trust it? It's not easy to trust advertisement. And now, gradually, the whole life will be like this. I don't know if people can trust the doctor, the banker. Who knows? So if one develops a trust relationship between an orchestra and the audience, then maybe certain services could be taken over by the orchestra.
You also often speak about how important it is to, when you play a concert, to have the people in mind, the listener in mind. Is that always in line with your own artistic visions? Is that difficult to combine sometimes?
I see what you're asking is that if I have an artistic vision, but the audience would need something different, that's not a very good situation, because then one has a conflict, an inner conflict. I don't know how to avoid it, or even if it happens. Let's imagine something else, like you would read a story to a child to fall asleep, for example. Or not even to fall asleep, but before sleeping you read a story to a child. It's obvious that you don't read a type of book which the child doesn't understand. Or you don't read in a language what the child doesn't understand. You choose a book which the child can pick up, can understand. And this is the type of contact to our audiences, that I choose the book which they understand. And the way how we perform it, it's a little bit related to the audience. Because, for example, with the child, if you read very fast, for example, there may be not enough time for the child to understand the details or the logical things which belong together. So you read in a way, maybe you make your voice more excited when there is an excitement in the story, or more calm when something like that is described. So your voice would be not a monotone, boring voice, but you help the experience of the child to experience the story. And this is how we performers help the music to be picked up by the audience. And this is what I mean, that we actually play for audiences, and we should be aware of how they hear it, how they understand it, in order to follow the story. But it doesn't mean any type of artistic compromise. I don't think, I've never had any conflict about this.
In concerts, there are many stories of artists feeling differently about their own performances. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes less so. For you, what makes a performance feel satisfying?
For me?
Yes.
Or for the audiences?
For you, when you go out, when you go off stage, when do you think this was a great concert?
This is a very interesting question, because I ask myself also very often, because it's so complex. It has to do with many factors. And if they come together, or most of them come together, then the music is a great experience for me. One element is the sound of the whole, the acoustics. It's very different, and sometimes it sounds great for the audiences, but not great where I stand. And sometimes I have a wonderful feeling, and I can just feel the music flow to me, and it's beautiful. The other important aspect is the human contact to the musicians, that I feel that they observe, they trust me, they are very keen and alert, and I can actually play almost like on an instrument. And I can feel then the sound in fingertips. Then something magic happens, because then I really hear what I wanted to hear a second earlier. You see, the conductor's problem is that you give an upbeat and you hear something which is not necessarily what you want to hear. But when you give an upbeat and you hear what you wanted to hear, that is the great experience.
That is beautiful. That needs really the collaboration of 100 people at the same time.
Yes, collaboration and a good sound, and of course it has to do also with my state of mind, how I feel. Not everybody is always the same. I also have good days, bad days, sometimes tired, sometimes excited, sometimes a little bit, distracted. I have many problems with myself. If I'm in a good state, then and all these other things work, then there might be a magic moment.
At least for me, I think, was it 1 year ago when you played Mahler's Ninth in Zurich? That was a moment that stayed with me, at least.
Good.
It was really a great concert. I wanted to ask a little bit about your early years in Budapest still, and I wasn't able to find this out online. Have you had encounters as a student with, for example, George Kurtag or Ferenc Rados or those educators in? Did you cross paths with them?
Yeah. Yes, in Hungary, Kurtag and Rados, who you mentioned, Rados unfortunately died just now a few weeks ago, and they were two giants teaching mainly chamber music, but generally music to everybody, wonderful, eye-opening musicians. I had some experience with them, more later, because I didn't study in the Franz Liszt Music Academy in Budapest. I went to Vienna when I was 19-year-old. So I didn't have Kurtag or Rados as a teacher. But they were the two last ones of these giants. I still remember a little bit the earlier giants of Hungary. One of them was Zoltán Kodály. Now, Kodály was an unbelievable person. He was like a semi-god in Hungary. For example, when Kodály entered the balcony of a music hall, then the whole audience stood up and started clapping, even if he was a member of the audience. There was this adoration for him. He was an old man in his 80s when I was a child, but he was like a saint. Now, Kodály was an unbelievable teacher, a very demanding teacher, who had a fantastic moral standards and clear logic in his mind. He gave up his compositional work in order to concentrate on music education. Then he invented a whole solfège system, this solmization. He adapted it to schools. He wrote school books. There is this Kodály little books of 1, 2, 3 for the 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. You can go through a whole Kodály method and learn music. And he really believed that the society would be better if they concentrate on music education at schools. And probably he's right. And he also believed other things which were very strong and radical ideas. For example, some people sometimes say that I can't sing, I am tone deaf. And he said there is no such thing as a tone deaf child. It takes a little more time for the teacher, but each child can sing perfectly in tune. So Kodály was an unbelievable inspiration for me. And there were a few others. There was Bence Szabolcsi. Szabolcsi was a musicologist, a student of Bartók and Kodály, and also a friend. He was maybe 10, 20 years younger, but not much more. He was an incredible educator, somebody who taught music theory and music literature to all of us on a level of humanity which is very difficult to describe. I can tell you a few anecdotes if you're interested.
Please, if you have time, yes.
Well, Szabolcsi always played the piano in the classes of these very old publications of operas where you had the piano part and only the text above it, not the vocal part. And he was used to this. He said he spoke the text and played the piano in the same time. And it actually was very important that he made us clear how the music is written because of a certain text. So the combination of words and piano playing of him, it's very strongly in my mind. And then I remember he had wonderful conversations with the students. He was very kind to everybody. Once a student asked him that it is so clear that quality is going down, that the whole level of classical music is in a decline, and what will happen, where does it lead us, all kinds of crises in the music world. And I remember Szabolcsi saying, well, my dear friends, I would urge you not to despair, because maybe you can think of the Middle Ages, that after the collapse of the West Roman Empire, then there were surely people who were very, very much distressed and thought that this is the end of the world when the Middle Ages started. But they didn't have to wait even 800 years and Giotto appeared.
Nice. Good optimism there.
Yeah.
So the question I was going for, with all those big Hungarian educators in your environment, I guess what they all have in common is this big love for detailed work, right? For spending hours with certain passages, and all of that kind of work, of course. But how do you balance this with the pace of today's orchestra rehearsals, where every minute costs money, basically?
Yes, one doesn't have time. It's true that Leo Weiner, who was the legendary chamber music teacher, Weiner was the teacher of everybody, including Kurtág and Rados and all of them. And one hears stories of Leo Weiner taking the string quartet to his home and teaching them until midnight, working on every note, and until an upbeat really was lifting the music to the next note. He worked hours and hours on tiny details. That level of work is, yes, it would be great with an orchestra, but I think what I can hope for is that a certain remark in one rehearsal helps the next rehearsal and the next week and the next. So long-term work is important. On the other hand, of course, we have to do it faster. You are right, there is no time. And I think I learned something from certain composers about this speed. And I talk to young conductors a lot about it. That when you want to say something to the orchestra, you can say it very long or complicated. You can use 5-6 sentences and describe something in a complicated way. Or you can think of what is the word which the composer put there in the score. And the composer puts there something like moderato, which means moderately, or writes something like molto vivace, very alive, or occasionally a composer writes something a little more like nature related. It can be like shining or something. But very often the composer has to use one word because there is not more room in the score. So think of this one word, what the composer uses, and try to think in this way, that you want to express something. What is the one word which helps you to convey that feeling to the orchestra? So I very often tell my students, look for the keywords, say this one word rather than 5 sentences.
So let's stay a little bit with those short keywords. I don't keep you for long anymore. Recordings. What's your favorite thing and your least favorite thing about it?
Recordings is a human weakness. It's to document what we do, because why should it be documented? I think there were centuries of music making and no documents are available of Bach's organ playing or Haydn's string quartet performances. We don't know anything or very little. And why do we want to document this? I think it's a human weakness. It's very much like making photos. You make a lot of photos of yourself, your children, your experiences of a visit to the zoo or whatever. You make photos. Why? You want to document certain moments of life. And similarly, we feel that it would be nice if our music making is documented. I really see it as a human weakness. It's not necessary, but that's the way we are. And I also like to document my music making sometimes, not always.
Okay, so final question before I let you go. Is there anything you wish that people would ask you more often about your work?
What an interesting question. I don't know. I don't have anything which I can tell you what people should ask. This should ask. People should ask what interests them. I think that is very important. What really interests them. I experience it, of course, the other way around. People ask questions and I need to answer. And my problem is that very often you get these cliche questions. Everybody asks, when did you decide to become a conductor or whatever? There are meaningless questions. And I try not to give the same answer every time because it bores me. But then after a while, I thought if I always create these variations of answers, then I'm not really honest because that person really would like to hear the one answer, which is my very deep, true answer. What people should ask, I can only say, everybody should ask without inhibitions what interests them.
That's a great final word. Thank you so much, Iván Fischer, for your time. And thank you for watching. Please join us on May 18th to 21st for Mahler Symphony No. 5 with Budapest Festival Orchestra and Iván Fischer in Geneva, Lucerne, Zurich and Bern. And for more videos and interviews, subscribe to Migros Classics. Bye.
Thank you.